Hi everyone, it's me again, Micah from Micasakitchen&bar. It's lockdown again, so that means I've got a wee bit more time to make these awesome videos. I sincerely hope everyone is doing well, and today we are doing oysters. Oysters is one of those things where it's nice to have them in restaurants because it's already been opened, right? But now, restaurants are not open. So, what are you gonna do? You're gonna get yourself some fresh oysters or live oysters and you're gonna open them up at home, right? Because you never know what sort of quality you're gonna get if you do a takeaway from a restaurant. I'm gonna teach you today how to select an oyster. After selecting an oyster, how to store it, how to open it, and how to serve it. Now, when you select an oyster, if you're able to go to the supermarket and find oysters, there's going to be so many types. There's oysters from New Zealand, oysters from Australia, Japan. So I think the most important is you have to know what your preferences are. Number two is how to select them. Now, I get these oysters from Canada. At the moment, that's the season. The next season for me is going to be New Zealand. And whenever I select an oyster, it's always got to be closed, shut. An example of closed, shut oyster is going to be like this one. It is super live, it's super heavy as well, and there's absolutely no gaps whatsoever. An example of an oyster you should not buy is something like this. Yes, I purposely bought a crappy oyster just to show you which one you should not buy. That's an example of an oyster you should not buy, right? Even if it's slightly ajar, it's very questionable as well. If you were to see this oyster right here, it's a flat shell on the top and then sort of a curved cup at the bottom. So the oyster is essentially sitting inside that cup. I usually store them like this. If you store them like this, where the flat part at the bottom, there's a chance of that liquid that the oyster is swimming in to be leaked out. And the minute it starts to leak out, it's going to dry out, it's going to be, it's going to die. And then the likelihood of it being stored properly in the fridge is going to be very, very bad. So, number one, when you select an oyster, get it shut tight. Number two, when you are storing it, for example, you buy it on a Wednesday, you want to have it on Thursday, you keep it like that inside your fridge. It's going to be a bit tricky, but that's why you have something like a towel. Okay, so you fold the towel like that, and then you sort of keep it upright. Before we open, you gotta have some form of presentation board. Now, I usually like to present my oysters on a bed of salt. So, I've got some table salt over here. It's a lot of table salt. That is just plain water. I'm adding that to the salt. Going in bit by bit, getting a spoon and sort of mixing it around. And all of a sudden, you have created a sand-like texture that creates a bit more structure for the oyster to sit on. So, I've got my presentation plate. I'm going to spoon all that salt right inside. So what I like to do is create a base, something like that, so that the oyster can sit very, very comfortably on top. Ta-da! I've got a towel over here, so I'm going to teach you a fairly foolproof way of opening an oyster without injuring yourself. Get yourself a bowl like this. One for washing the oysters. It's just clean water. Okay, so clean water, a dustbin. Right? So when you get your oyster, you fold it, your cloth fairly thick. What you want to do is sort of close it like that, so you've got good stability. Go like that. You enter your knife through that. Right? I've got an oyster blade over here. If you don't have an oyster blade, I sincerely hope you purchase yourself one. It's fairly inexpensive. Go to a kitchen shop. Try to get the thin blade. The shell on top is flat, cut, and it sort of has this hinge somewhere at the back. So it's somewhere over here. At that hinge is where you sort of want to break it. Right? After you've broken it, you've opened the oyster, there is this muscle right over here, and you sort of want to just cut the top. You're sort of going at an angle like that, rather than going downwards. Because downwards, there's a risk that you might damage the meat, and you don't really want to do that. If you enter via here, there's a chance of actually damaging your thumb, and that's usually the injuries will always occur within this area of the hand. So you sort of want to protect yourself. If you got gloves, perfectly fine, wear your gloves as well. There. The likelihood of injury, it drops a lot further, right? Okay, so here we go. We're going to enter. I sort of go down that. This is my comfort zone, right? And then you sort of weigh in your weight, and then you sort of twist, like so, like riding a bicycle or a motorcycle, right? Alright, and then you would have opened the shell. And once you open the shell, I quite like to lift it up a little bit. After you lift it up a bit, I like to constantly wash my knife so that shards of the shell doesn't quite go inside the meat, right? After you lift it up, aim for that muscle over there. And you sort of cut. Lift. So that's sort of what you're targeting for as well. A very clean cut around that muscle, so there's no oyster meat left. Right. I'm putting that inside clean water so that I can sort of wash it. Let's take a look at the oyster right now. Oyster does not look funky, it does not smell funky. That means it's safe for consumption. Because I've entered via the back, there might be some debris. Get your pinky and wash all that debris off. Underneath that muscle, wash all that gunk off. Do not want to be having shells and eating an oyster. There's this muscle over here that is joining the oyster to the shell. You want to cut that off. So via here, and then you sort of scoop up a wee bit. And then there you have it. An oyster that is perfectly shucked and absolutely beautiful. If you find any shells, use your hands. If you've got dinner guests coming at 6 o'clock and you don't want to be spending 30 minutes opening up oysters, do this way in advance. You can do it as much as 3 hours in advance. That's why I wash the cap. Do that. Place that on the bed, and then after that, chuck that inside the fridge, and before serving, you simply lift up the shell, and boom. All you gotta do is eat and drink. Cheers. This particular oyster is super nice because the flesh is incredibly creamy. It's not too big, it's got a fantastic balance of the creaminess, sweetness, iron, and the salinity. The only thing that's missing is acidity. That's why I like to have a nice squeeze of lemon, sometimes a bit of spice from the pepper, maybe a bit more bitterness from extra virgin olive oil. Or if you want to go the route of Japanese, you could easily make your own ponzu sauce or throw in some fresh herbs. So now, I'm just going to open these up and then I'm going to show you how I usually present it. The appearance, number one, is key. The amount of water, number two, and the smell. If you think it's questionable, throw it out. This one, for me, the gills are a little bit dark, so maybe it's not as live as it should be. However, it doesn't smell bad. I don't see much parasite as well. And there you go, nice clean flesh over there. So I've got nice lemon over here, and what I usually do is I just grate that, right? Grate that on top, and then so that adds an element of fragrance. 1, 2. Cut this in half, and got a wee bit of pepper, overcompensating. Pepper mill. Again, you can have absolutely whatever you want to go onto this. Alright, some I've got a bit of seaweed lying around. I don't really want to throw it away, right? Just make your plate a little bit prettier, right? Thank you very much for joining me in another episode of My Perfect Bite. I hope you enjoy my Canadian oysters with a bit of lemon. Super simple, but that's all it needs. I hope to bring you more episodes in the weeks to come. You guys stay safe. Keep those masks on, social distancing, and if you can help it, stay at home. It's going to keep everyone much more safer. Alright? Take care of yourself, and bye-bye.